Lord Andrew Adonis, welcome to our little show. Lovely
Good afternoon, great to be with you.
Now, before we talk about ID cards, can we talk a little bit about the madness of the past week or so, probably just under a week? It would have been just under a week that we were under the impression that Jacob Rees-Mogg and the ERG were going to be doing for Theresa May, and I think we don't know what was happening. Maybe we'd have a new leader of the country, a Tory leader of the country today. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case with 20-odd ERG members have sent letters of no confidence.
Yeah, the whole country is looking on in astonishment and horror at what's going on inside the Conservative Party, because after all, this is the party that's governing the country. It's not just a sideshow. I mean, they're behaving like a sort of sport group of 12-year-olds, but they're supposed to be running the country. But I did like Jacob's argument, because when you think about what his argument is, it's that we need a second referendum on Theresa May because we didn't like the first referendum in 2016. You remember the one which she won to become lead the first time? And listening to him saying that things had changed fundamentally in the last 2 years, I thought, yeah, I agree with that. That's what we want for the country at large, to stop all this Brexit nonsense. We want a second referendum because things have changed fundamentally in the last 2 years.
I'm genuinely surprised that they haven't mustered the signatures that they need, the 48, because I have been living under the impression, as many other newspaper readers, I would suggest millions of newspaper readers have over possibly the last 2 years, we've been here sitting thinking there's a large rump of extreme Brexiteers in the Tory party who can't wait to go out on no deal, and that might mean getting rid of Theresa May, and actually the reality is there's hardly any of them.
That's true, but you've got to understand the seriousness of the situation we're in. The reason why most Tory MPs have rallied to Theresa May is because she is going to do Brexit, because they don't think that they could survive with their constituency parties if they were seen to be anti-Brexit. But what she has done is to draw a line halfway between Nigel Farage and a total trashing of the country, and where mainstream opinion is, which is basically, I think, with me and those people who want a people's vote, so that people can decide whether they like this deal or stay in the European Union. What she's done is to go halfway between those two. She's done her deal. Remember, a 39 billion quid in order to give us fewer trading opportunities than we had before. I mean, what is this 39 quid buying? So I don't give her too much slack. The idea that somehow this government, which is about to take us out of the European Union, paying 39 quid and trash our trade, is the voice of reason, I think is to drink the Kool-Aid on what's happened in the last 2 years with Brexit.
Just drink the Kool-Aid. Just before we move on to ID cards, what do you think is going to happen?
I think her deal, the 39 billion for nothing much, I think that's going to be defeated. There aren't the votes for it because all the opposition parties are voting against, and both wings of the Conservative Party are going to split. So the moderate Conservatives like Dominic Grieve, who actually know that this is 39 billion for a load of junk, they're going to vote against it. But so are the remnants. Jacob and however many people he got, they'll be voting against it too. So it's definitely going down. The question is what happens after.
The DUP, of course,
they're saying they're voting against too.
And they pretty much walked on the budget.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be absolutely sure they're voting against. Because remember, last time they bought off with £1 billion, so maybe this time it's 2 or 3 billion. I mean, I think it's a Dutch auction. Frankly, they could, whatever they want, they can have. If they want gold-plated VIP lounges in Belfast Airport, I suspect the DUP could get it at the moment. So they may come in line, but it looks as if it's going down. The question is what happens after that. Now, my leader, Jeremy Corbyn, wants an election, which I think would be a great idea, but I don't think it's going to happen because that means Tory MPs like turkeys voting for Christmas.
But
so I think
the
we get a referendum.
If the DUP were to walk away, then Theresa May,
she might have to. She might have to. But I don't think that they're going to walk away because they, to be blunt, I don't think they want Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. So I don't think
they love the power as well. They've got unprecedented power.
Indeed, absolutely, because they've got they hold the balance at the moment. So I think there's a really good chance we're going to get a referendum. But the key point is that's where public opinion is as well. Public opinion shows that overwhelmingly, whether people voted Leave or Remain 2 years ago, they want their say.
These are those pesky polls which let us down time and time again. What do you say, Andrew, to the legions of people, for there are many of them, that are determined that their vote back in 2016 meant to leave the European Union? Everything. Leave. That's what they want. Yeah. And who are you, an unelected politician, to tell them otherwise?
Look, let's be clear. It's not me or any other politician that's telling them what to do. This will be a people's vote and the people will decide. And remember, the people cannot betray the people. If the people take a decision that we're staying in, it's not my fault, it's their fault. But when I say their fault, I think, frankly, it's going to be a liberation for them because as these 2 years have gone on and people have realised it was a pack of lies they were told 2 years ago that you can't have your cake and eat it, we're going to have to pay 39 billion quid, so there isn't the 350 million a week for the NHS and I think public opinion is going to do what is the right and sensible thing, which is, look, this EU is not perfect. Look, what institutions are perfect, but is it a good idea to trash our trade, trash our jobs, and deny our young people the opportunities to be able to live, forge relationships, work across Europe? As people see that, I think common sense will prevail.
OK, now, we triggered Article 50 back in March last year. And I say that because you've backed a report which suggests that ID cards could be a better way of controlling immigration than Brexit. This report suggests the UK should do more within existing EU rules to tighten controls on immigration. It's been pointed out that we're the only country in the bloc not to have a national ID card system. The Global Future think tank said that in interviews with European politicians, they were surprised that we hadn't made use of such powers to control free movement, as many other EU countries have. The trouble is, of course, that in the years leading up to our Brexit discussions, there were many, many discussions about ID cards. And at the time, I know that the Labour government was minded to charge us for them. I think it was talked about something like £30 a card. And I think very much security and prevention of terrorism was in people's thinking. And then it was pointed out that actually the 9/11 bombers had ID cards that benefit fraud, that I think, according to the government's own figures, the vast majority of benefit fraud is lying about various circumstances, not about who you are. Why do you think ID cards are going to work? And what is the point of even suggesting this when we've triggered Article 50 and we're going to be leaving the European Union?
Look, I'm not pretending that ID cards are the panacea, and I certainly don't want to charge people for them. I think that was a big mistake of the scheme which we introduced when I was in government, that people were going to have to pay 30 quid. I think electronic ID cards, so there would be a card, but there'd also be electronic, so you get a lot of additional services, like you'd have a chip and you could load other things onto your card, like your library card, like your driving licence, like your passport for use inside the EU, like if you're a young person, your proof of age card, because all young people have to go into the pubs and bars with their proof of age cards, like your national insurance card. So I don't see this as intrusive and new burdens on people. I see it as, for the individual citizen, it's going to be a better service than they get now. They'll get it for free. But the point about immigration is that nobody who's legitimately in this country needs to have any concerns at all. But
hang on.
But we don't know.
You say that so easily, but you only
have
have to look at this. What now? 4 inquiries looking at undercover police work and the bodies that they themselves spied on, environmental groups where perhaps people had no criminal record. We are aware that the NSA breach from the US, in which metadata is being hacked from British people, also German politicians. I mean, it's all very well saying, trust the government with this data and you don't have to worry about it. Actually, I don't trust government with this data. In fact, I can't think of any. I think it'd be insane to trust government with such data.
Well, look, the way we see this card actually working is it would bring together databases and cards which are currently issued anyway. So half the population have driving licences. Yes. Most 17-year-olds get, or
you
soon
don't
after,
have to carry your driving licence, of course.
No, but I'm not saying you should have to carry your ID cards. No, I don't think there would be a card. I think actually young people will carry it because it'll double as a proof of age card. But you have to be able to give your details, and so it can be checked on a database. If, for example, if people suspect that you're working illegally, let's be clear why this would be beneficial. In this country, we have no means of knowing who is here legally and illegally if they've come from the EU, which I think is part of the concern that people had 2 years ago. Every other country in the EU requires you to have identification registration, not necessarily to carry the car, but to be registered, and often also to actually register when you come into the country. If we knew who was in the country, we could prevent illegal working, we could deal with other forms of illegality, including, as you said, people who are here for very dodgy purposes. And I think it will be a net plus for the public. But I do agree with you, we shouldn't charge people for the card. It should be a badge of citizenship. It should be a benefit that people get, not an obligation. And we do need the government to do it competently, and it wasn't done competently in the past.
OK. How are we going to even move this through our wonderful parliamentary system when we've triggered Article 50 and we're looking to leave on March the 29th?
Well, let's be clear. If we stop Brexit in the next 6 months because we've got a people's vote, acres of parliamentary time are going to open up. Do you know, Matthew, I've spent 162 hours in the House of Lords debating the first piece of Brexit legislation, and we've got another 9 pieces coming. Now, what I say to your listeners, what I say to your listeners, because they've got to realise what the opportunity cost of Brexit is, all of the time that we're spending in this labyrinthine business of replacing Trade Treaty A with Trade Treaty B, repatriating all the law and all of that could be spent on sorting out the NHS, improving the education system, and doing sensible things like an electronic ID card that will leave people better off.
I'll come back to you again. What do you say to those legions of people that want to leave the European Union, that say they knew exactly what they're doing? You've spent hundreds of hours debating the first of 9 points. They spent thousands of hours in their homes looking at all the leaders' debates, reading all the newspapers, going online, fully getting to grips with the gargantuan beast that is the EU, making their electoral decision. They want to go out. Who are you to say we need ID cards now?
Well, let's be clear what I'm saying. There should be a people's vote. So they will have the say on whether we stay or leave the EU when they see the terms. When somebody said to me, but we voted on this 2 years ago, and I said, what's this? Because the actual deal on which we're leaving, we saw for the first time last Wednesday, yes. You know, the 580 pages that have just been published. So they'll have their say. What I'm trying to do is to deal with some of the issues that were raised 2 years ago. There were two big issues that were raised very clearly. One was austerity. People felt that austerity was bad, and they wanted an end to that, and they blamed the EU for that, when in fact actually it's our government at home that should be blamed. And the other wasn't immigration in the sense of people being free to move. It was a concern that we didn't know who was in the country, who wasn't in the country, illegal working, wages being undercut, things of that kind. Now, I think we can deal with those, and it's perfectly possible to deal with them while being in the EU. And the idea that we should have to leave the EU and trash all of our trade and all of our jobs to deal with a problem which is there that could be sorted, I think would be a really big mistake. And also, I think people sense that, which is the reason why there's such support for a people's vote.
Assuming, and we hear it from all sides, that the deal is voted down in Parliament. I think pretty much everybody is coming along with that, unless a miracle happens. Assuming the deal gets voted down, do you think that will be the push that Theresa May might need to at least discuss the possibility of a people's vote?
Definitely, because she's run out of road.
I was going to say, is there any other option?
Yeah. Well, the only other option, she could herself call the people's vote directly, which I think she might do, rather than be defeated on it in the House of Commons. I think she might call it. If I were her...
So you think she might go to the country rather than...
No, she might call a people's vote. She might call a referendum.
Before going to Parliament to hear what MPs think?
To be blunt, I think only after she's had it defeated. Yeah. But, you know, she is supposed to be the leader of the country. The country needs a way out of the crisis if her deal has been rejected. If I were her, what I'd say is, look, I've done my best for the country over the last 2 years. Let's be clear, Theresa May did not cause Brexit. Remember, that was that guy Cameron who called that referendum 2 years ago. She had to pick up the pieces after. I could see her saying, after she's been defeated on the deal...
She did get rid of a lot of border guards, which of course is quite useful when you want to count who's coming in and out of the country.
That's true. But what she could say after she's defeated is, look, I've done my best. I've negotiated on your behalf and got this deal. A lot of you think it might be better off after all to stay. Let's decide. And if she were to do that, I'd have huge respect for her, because I think that's where the country is at the moment.
And to the Nigel Farages of this world who say you do that and they'll be rioting on the streets, what do you say to them?
Nigel's very careful, because he knows if he starts talking about a referendum causing rioting, he'd be toast politically. And I've challenged him about this directly. And he said, because I say, of course, we're a law-abiding people, the Brits. We have these elections. We have vigorous debates. I mean, I spent a lot of my life in radio studios with Nigel Farage, and let's be frank, I give as good as I get and vice versa. But when I said to him, look, Nigel, you're not saying there's going to be unrest, are you? He could immediately see what would be the implications of him dodging that one. But, of course there won't be unrest, he said to me. So it's not coming from that quarter.
There's certainly plenty of Brexit supporters that do talk about unrest, as my own timeline would follow.
But they're deeply irresponsible, and I don't think that Nigel or others can go near there. And let's be clear, if we start saying that they've got a veto, these people have got a veto because they threaten unrest, then we'll never hold another general election in this country. So people have got to understand that democracy itself is at stake. If you give this lot a veto, every time there's something that's about to happen that they don't like, what are they going to threaten next? And that undermines democracy.
Do you think, in retrospect, we might have done better to follow modern Germany and do away with referenda?
I do. And the reason Germany doesn't have referenda is that we obliged them in their constitution to rule out referenda. Yeah. It was Clement Attlee, who was the Labour
Hitler used them very effectively, didn't they, to push Germany into war?
Exactly right. And what Attlee said was that referenda were the device of demagogues and dictators. And Churchill supported him. That's why there's no provision in the German constitution for referenda. Do you know, I think we should have taken that advice ourselves.
Well, so what are we saying? Because at the heart of this is the suggestion that will certainly bridle some people, that actually the ordinary British people pay their taxes, and within their taxes pay the salaries of our MPs, the expenses of you and your colleagues in the Lords, to make those decisions on our behalf. So are we saying that it's best to leave it that way to the professionals?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say the professionals. They are elected. Because let's be clear, in the House of Lords, we just revise. The big decisions, like whether or not we leave the European Union, will be taken by MPs. They're elected. So there's nothing undemocratic about that. In our parliamentary system of government, you elect the MPs and then they take these decisions. And if you don't like them, you vote them out. The problem, as we found with the referendum, is not that I think that they're wrong in all cases, but in an issue like this, where there wasn't a clear proposition put before people. Because do you remember...
But I mean, how much clearer could it be? Do you want to leave the European Union? That's a fairly clear proposition.
It seemed clear until people then said, what does leave mean? Are we staying in the customs union and the single market or not? Are we giving them any money or not? Are we going to stop EU migrants from coming here or not? What are we going to do about the border in Ireland? People have been waking up over the last 2 years to the fact. And of course, we've got 50 different varieties of Brexit, which is the reason why we've got Rees-Mogg campaigning against Theresa May about the form of Brexit. So that's what's happening at the moment. So if you look at the situation we've got at the moment, there's a crisis. They can't decide what the form of Brexit is that's acceptable. We're seeing a lot of the detail. We don't want to see the country trashed. So for goodness sake, let's have another referendum and put this nightmare behind us.
Lord Andrew Adonis, lovely talking to you.